Right. Om Shri Sai Ram, offering our humble pranams at Swami's lotus feet. A warm welcome to everyone to the 9th session of Sai Dev Talks. Before we begin, I would like to give a brief of what Sai Dev Talks is all about. Sai Dev Talks is an initiative by the men and women alumni of our institute, where we invite our own brothers and sisters who are working in the social development sector to share their experiences of solving some of the society's most challenging problems. Amongst us, we have founders of social enterprises and NGOs, as well as operators and professionals working across a wide range of development organizations who are solving problems and challenges across various areas like education, rural livelihood, healthcare, nutrition, water and sanitation, access to governance, skill development, climate, energy, and much, much more. Through Sai Dev Talks, our intention is simple. First, to learn from each other's experiences, and second, to widen our scope of thinking. While corporates and startups are often seen as natural career options for most of us, we also want to encourage us to thoughtfully consider social development as a meaningful path to contribute, serve, and grow. In the audience today, we have both alumni members who are working or interested in these areas, along with students of our institute. I would like to introduce now our speaker for today. We have Brother Vijay Sai Pratap amongst us. Brother Vijay is the co-founder and CEO of Gram Vaani. Gram Vaani is a social tech organization that is building a communication platform to help the underserved communities access useful information, raise grievances, and make their voices heard. It works across areas like health, governance, labor rights, and women and child development, using technology to drive awareness, accountability, and behavior change. Brother Vijay will be speaking today on the topic Beyond the Hype, Tech4Good, Wins, Misses, and Hard Truths. And although I said that he will be speaking and he will have a presentation, this is not going to be a lecture. We would love all of you to actively participate, ask questions, debate, and discuss so that all of us go back wiser. That's it for the introduction. If at any point of time during this presentation you have questions, you can keep putting that in the chat box. I would request maybe 2-3 people from the Vrindavan campus if you could coordinate and put questions, or you can also note questions while Brother Vijay is speaking, and after about 15-20 minutes of his talk, we'll take all those questions together. I'll hand over the virtual mic to you, Brother Vijay. Over to you.
Sai Ram, thank you so much, Karan brother, and offering my humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Truly an amazing opportunity to be able to speak to all of you. And as Karan brother rightly said, the intent is not to make a presentation or give you, share knowledge about something that you all don't know about. I think technology is a very big part of our lives and will continue to grow, as we all would acknowledge. The intent is to try and pose some important questions amongst us, right? So let me just take a second to probably share my screen.
Brother Vijay, give me also a minute. I'm just checking with the students if they can hear us or not.
Yes.
Can someone from the campus please confirm? Sai Ram, mic testing 1, 2, 3. Sai Ram.
I don't know if they're able to hear.
Yeah, they can't hear us.
Karan, we will continue with the session. I'll coordinate with them to fix the issue.
Okay, all right.
Should we wait for a couple of minutes, Manoj? Because they will probably be missing the...
Yeah, we'll just give them... Tagore, if you can hear me, or okay, you can't hear me.
We can call them. And... Meanwhile, let me just share the screen to check and test it that at least the screen is working. Are we able to see the screen?
Yes.
Does it show the slide view? The presentation?
Yeah, it's showing the full slide view. Yeah.
Okay. It's continuing to show as is, right? So as the presentation view.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Pulkit, why you are not able to hear?
We'll probably give
I said
them a couple of
I'm able to
minutes.
hear. I can hear you. I can hear. Yes, I'm sorry if I confused.
Karan, I suggest we continue. It might take a little more time for them to fix it. So let's continue for now.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, Vijay. I'll help them fix the issue. We'll continue for now.
Okay, can you request I go to confirm in the chat box as soon as
it
they're
will take a minute or two.
listening?
Yeah, I will coordinate with them. Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. Brother Vijay, over to you.
Yeah, okay. Great. Again, offering my humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Let me just begin this session. And probably once the students are able to join, happy to just touch upon some points we may have missed out. But yeah, I think as you would have noted from the topic, right? So sounds a bit provocative in some ways. It's called Beyond the Hype, Technology for Good, Wins, Misses, and Hard Truths, right? So technology is not a neutral delivery mechanism, right? It is in Kentaro Toyama's words, I refer to this book. It's a book called Geek Hearsay. I will, of course, share a list of books that some of you would be interested in reading and learning more about. So in his own words, technology is an amplifier of human intent and existing social structures, right? What this means basically in practice is that if power is already concentrated, technology actually concentrates it further. If institutions are corrupt, digitizing them actually encodes the corruption even more efficiently. If inequality is structural, apps and platforms built on market logic will further deepen it. Now, this is not exactly a technology argument, right? So it's not an argument against technology. It is an argument against the concept or an idea that technology is sufficient on its own. The silver bullet fallacy, or as I call it, the shiny object syndrome in many ways, right? So the question is always, technology is in whose hands, who's steered by whom, and towards what ends, right? That's fundamentally what we are hoping to speak about. Again, a very clear disclaimer, I'm not an expert, but I'm actually a student of this space and continue to learn. This is my 11th year as a social entrepreneur working towards building Gram Vaani, a social tech enterprise, which is headquartered in Delhi. I'm the co-founder, along with my another co-founder, Dr. Aditeshwar Seth. Adi teaches at IIT Delhi in the Department of Computer Science. My learning is also built on an inspiring body of work, again, led by stalwarts across this sector I've read and learned from, including my own co-founder, who's again very well known in this space. There's a lot of learning from our interactions and work with communities and partners who again have been very kind enough to open up their spaces and lives for us to implement solutions, technologies, fail hard and also learn from, right? So we owe a lot to them. And importantly, my own team, again, who's been working grounds up and putting all the hard work in terms of building this knowledge and body of work that we are able to speak from today. The next point is that I'm not at all a techno pessimist, right? you'll probably hear some of these words like techno-utopianism, techno-solutionism, techno-determinism, right? And just to clarify, I'm not a techno-pessimist, right? So I am an engineer by education. I work in the technology space, in the technology for development space. And I'm not suggesting that technology is all bad. But what we are trying to do is questioning the approach, the need for feedback loops, accountability structures. Who is accountable for the flaws and failures when there's no face or voice to connect to, right? So this is another point I wanted to highlight. The intent of the discussion is, again, not to provide all the answers. We may not even have all the answers, but to offer questions to ponder upon and go back and think through deep, learn and read about, right? So, and probably even in our own work, how can we learn from? We cannot escape technology, and that's a fact, right? So remember that technologies, but we have to remember that technology is only an enabler. Now, good or bad, it's very easy to blame technology, but I think it reflects and amplifies the intent and capacity of individuals or communities, right? So I think that's also something that we have to be very conscious and cautious about. Now, today's journey. Now, there are so many exciting projects that can have tremendous social impact, right? I'm sure all of you can relate to and would know of as well. But now, why isn't everybody working on such projects, right? So there are such huge problems to be solved, right? I think the problem is that many technologists have a very different conception of what is social impact as well. Now, working for Facebook and having 1 billion users touch your code to connect with one another is also having probably a huge social impact in debatable ways, right? So that could also be called a social impact project. Now what I want to discuss is when a technology project should qualify as doing social impact, and I will the intent is to try and make a point that this is what all of us should be doing, right? When we're implementing technology, building technology solutions, right? We live in an era where a single app can summon a car or a doctor, yet 800 million people still, find it difficult, in terms of getting access to food security, right? Now, things have definitely improved over the years with improved policy interventions, with improved, program schemes and interventions on the ground. But we will all acknowledge that there's still a significant gap on the ground, right? How do we make sense of all of this? Now, Gram Vaani's context, it was founded in 2009 by Adi, who's my co-founder, and Delhi researchers. Gram Vaani, so I joined Gram Vaani with Adi in 2014 when we launched the second avatar of Gram Vaani. It's called Onion Dev Technologies Private Limited. The onion is a very interesting metaphor. People asked us saying that, why did you call it onion, right? So it's basically unpeeling each layer, right? If you want to achieve and go to the core of the problem, you have to unpeel each layer, which includes the society, the institutions you work with, the communities you work with, the individuals you engage with, right? And that's how you will have to go through the whole process. And it's not just a one slice, process, right? So, and, in a very, lighthearted manner, we also used to say that it's so difficult that as you unpeel, you start crying, right? So that's how the onion dev kind of metaphor also kind of came in. And Gram Vaani builds voice-based community engagement platforms, hyper-local, community-anchored engagement platforms using voice as a medium. And we launched it over 100 plus districts, engaged with over 5 million users, largely from the rural and urban, underserved and marginalized population segments. And we've generated over 1 million plus community voices from these platforms, and which again reflects our mission of reversing the flow of information, because most conventional media works top down, does not provide with access to contextual information or even access to safe spaces where people can express, learn from each other, and also collectivize for local issues. So we operate across multiple central and northern states and work with more than 250 plus partners. Users can actually use simple feature phones. They do not need smartphones. They do not need to be text literate, right? So they do not need internet access as well. Now, the paradox that this talk is trying to address is that the same decade that produced the iPhone also says the number of people pushed into food insecurity also rising. All right, and technology is booming, but for whom? Now, this is not a celebration of technology, nor a tech demo, nor is it a complete, blasting of technology and that it's not good. But it's an honest reckoning with what works, what fails, and why. right? And the important part is we go back with questions, and questions we probably will have to ponder. We'll obviously refer to Gram Vaani at different points, right? So, and we'll also learn from some of our hard failures as well. And not necessarily all technology for good interventions will be open to this kind of transparency, but we are happy to share these learnings, right? So the hype and reality. Now, is technology for good a genuine attempt at justice, or a way for elites to conscience launder while maintaining the status quo? Now, this is a bit of a provocative statement I'm making. I know it might make some of us a little uncomfortable, right? Saying that, is it what we do with technology for good? Is it a genuine intended attempt at justice, or are we trying to find ways to satisfy our conscience, right, while ensuring that the status quo is maintained? Now, this is, I probably want to leave it for a few seconds to let it land, to let it sink in for you to reflect, right? So now, I mean, please feel free to put in your comments if you think otherwise, if you would like to contest it, right? But I just thought I'll probably make the statement. I'll make the statement again. Is technology for good a genuine attempt at justice, or is it a way for elites to conscience launder while maintaining the status quo? Right? Breathe, let it sink in, let it think through it, right? And please feel free to share your thoughts on this. Now, let me just come to this very interesting, this is a Mentimeter, right? What you all can do is, I will request all of you, in terms of just access this. Just hold, I will. Yeah, right. Just hold. Yeah, right. So, yeah, this is I will probably put a QR code. Just enter just scan this code and put in one word. In one word, in your view, what describes the reality, not the promise, right? I'm re-emphasizing what describes the reality, not the promise of digital technology's impact on underserved communities today. Right? Just scan this QR code, right, and put in one word. What does this reflect?
I've also shared the link and the code in the chat box if anyone doesn't have a phone handy. You can refer the chat box to access this website.
Reach, hope, on shelf, tech. Scale. Access.
Brother Vijay.
Yes, yes. Are you able to hear me? Hello? Manoj, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was surprised. I thought. Yeah, Karan, are you able to hear me? Okay, interesting words. Integral, hope, advantage to knowledge, opportunities, rabbit hole, interesting disparity, interesting intuitiveness, accessibility, opportunities, interesting. Interesting opportunities. Okay. Disillusioned, very good. Elevate, reach, hope. Nice. Great. Okay, we'll probably stop here and we'll obviously discuss this further. Now, Now it's amazing. I mean, in terms of, I do see that a lot of us are obviously quite optimistic about digital technology and its impact on communities. It's great. Again, as I said, the intent is not to make you or shift you to pessimism, but I think the intent is to make this optimism harder earned, right, and more honest about it. Now, I really want to understand when somebody's given this word saying that disillusioned, right? Would you want to probably just unmute yourself? I don't know who said that, but I want to understand, why do you think that's the word that comes to your mind? There's no right or wrong answer, but would love to hear from you, whoever has said this disillusioned, right? So why do you think so?
I had commented delusion, primarily because the technology is changing at the speed of thought, and by the time somebody adopts to something and something else new comes up, so they don't know where to go, what is the right thing, or what approach to be taken.
Bang on. Your good name, brother?
Arya.
Arya, great. Very, very, very relevant point. Just one more, somebody else who probably on the positive side, somebody who said hope, right? Would you want to probably just unmute yourself and just tell me, why do you think so? Anybody? Just, I'm sure many of you have given this word hope, but would love to hear from one of you as to why do you think so? Yeah.
I had answered hope, and the reason I did was if we have to, for example, bring people out of poverty or any challenge that we are facing at scale, technology has to be that layer that enables us to do that on scale. And generally, I'm an optimistic person, and that's why I wrote hope.
Great. Thank you, brother. Your good name, brother?
Karan.
Okay, great, Karan. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize. Yeah, no, perfect. Sounds good. I think this is a great, reflection of what we all think about when we think about digital technology and its impact on underserved communities, right? Let's keep this as is, right? And as we go through the process, let's also evaluate what brings what emotions, or does the presentation also or discussion evoke amongst all of you, right? So I'll just probably just read through just this slide, right? Very, very interesting and important slide. The credit goes to Anuradha Gupta, one of a doctoral researcher that Gram Vaani is working with on an intervention around climate change, right? And she posted this particular message as part of one of her field visits, right? This happened during the India AI Summit period, right? So just read this. Who needs an algorithm? Now, throughout the project, I kept looking for AI, that is artificial intelligence, of course, as a technology, as a marker of significance, and as a key actor. Now, I didn't find it. It's only now that I understand why. Now, because I was not looking for it in spaces it didn't belong, right? The people I met didn't need an algorithm to make rules for them. They needed safeguards to ensure that the codified rules of the commons were not misappropriated for the benefit of a powerful few. They did not need workflows to be automated, right? The first point is that they didn't need an algorithm to make rules for them. Second point is they did not need workflows to be automated. What did they need? They needed data to challenge, right? Not data collected from them. They needed data and information to challenge and dismantle the structures that upheld these workflows. Now, structures built on top-down norms of budget and target allocation, that are the structures that needed to be broken. Structures that are enabled by caste hierarchies and power asymmetries. Structures that rendered them invisible or important. They were not looking to be educated on how the algorithm works, what guardrails were being developed, what rules were they coded on, what norms guided data use. Instead, they asked if the tools could amplify their voices, legitimize their rights and entitlements, capture systematic violations and erasures, and hold local village councils and institutions to account. Right? So think of it, who needs an algorithm? And in other words, who needs technology? Now, when does technology actually disempower? Now, every technology for good project must consciously try to avoid harm. That is obviously the floor, not the ceiling. That's the bare minimum. Now, top-down imposition always disempowers. Now, why does it disempower? When users have no agency to understand, manage, or seek redress from a technology, harm follows. Right? What again was mentioned earlier when one of the brothers said that Arya, I think, mentioned about disillusionment, right? So when users have no agency, when technology is changing so rapidly, right, and they have no agency to understand, manage, learn, or even know which channels to reach out to seek redressal, when technology creates some issues for them, that is when harm follows. That is when disillusionment happens. Now, digital ID systems and AI failures are a very clear example of this. Now, there are definitely many people, from the broader, greater good perspective or concept, a lot of people have definitely benefited. But we have to remember that there are a lot of people who also had to face the brunt of digital technologies when implemented with a tech-first or tech-only kind of an approach. Right? Datafication, again, has limitations. Now, trying to codify complex human realities into algorithmic rules also backfires. Right? Now, Facebook's attempt, for example, defining community standards. Now, but that was largely focused on Facebook's whole algorithm, or rather its whole priority was on increasing engagement so that ad revenue could be increased or improved, right? So that's when complex human realities, which means human engagement, is sort of codified into algorithmic rules. That's when it sort of backfires. And we know what kind of echo chambers some of these social media platforms have also been creating, right? So some technologies obviously built also to, in some ways, exploit, right? So for example, platforms like, while we all use Uber and many of these platforms, large platforms, they also are in some ways, creating frameworks for disempowerment in some sense, right? So, and that disempowerment is not a feature, right? It's a feature and it's not a bug per se, and it's made with an intent that obviously benefits these organizations. Now, the pattern is quite consistent. Now, these failure modes, whether it's imposition, datafication, overreach, or explicit exploitation, recur across the context, right? And have been documented for decades. And these are not accidents, right? So when does technology disempower? When it is imposed top-down, limits of when we have to understand the limits of datafication, when it is designed for exploitation, and when elite capture is obviously the central part of this interface, right? So in fact, Gram Vaani, we ourselves, I will obviously speak about it, when Gram Vaani itself, when we were building technology and implementing some of our solutions, we faced this when higher caste volunteers within the communities were overpowering and misappropriating the platform and silencing folk music, local voices from the most marginalized groups to sort of pursue their own agendas, right? So, and design didn't prevent it. We designed it with the greatest intent, right? But design didn't prevent it, which is where the steps that we had to take were not about design or development of technology, but actually management of technology, right? That's something that I wanted to, obviously highlight. And when we look at design for exploitation, we also have to remember that we become data, we become products, and we are not obviously beneficiaries, right? So these are some points that are very important to sort of remember. Now, who gets left out, right? If a system is meant to include the poor, but relies on high-speed internet and unworn fingerprints, who is it really designed for? Right. So look at each of these personas, right? So for example, an elderly widow with worn fingerprints in, rural Jharkhand, right? So how many Anganwadi databases were ever consulted in designing the system? Now, I'm not going through a Mentimeter process. It will take a little time. So, but just think about it, right? So if you just raise your hands and know, for example, if you raise your hands, I'm sure Karan will be able to check, saying that, okay, now in terms of how many people are just say that, okay, raise your hand if you think as an elderly widow, if that was your persona, would you benefit from it? or would you feel excluded, or would you feel that you have gained power over the others, right? That persona of an elderly widow with worn fingerprints in rural Jharkhand, right? Biometrics, for example, when she uses her fingers are worn because of the hard labor that she's been doing for so many years, and because of which the biometric is not working, and hence her ration, which she's entitled to, is not given to her because her biometric isn't matching. Right? Think about it. But were the Anganwadi databases, were the women, were the community groups who earlier were supporting communities to access PDAs, access ration, were they consulted in this process? Unlikely, right? Think of a young male daily wage worker with a feature phone and no data access, right? Whose definition of connectivity assumed, I mean, when we built the system, we assumed everybody has broadband, everybody has smartphone, everybody has connectivity. Right? Think of an upper caste SHG coordinator with a smartphone, right? For others actually depend on her to authenticate. She becomes a gatekeeper. Think of it. Think of the power structures, right? This is what is called as elite capture, even before the system scales. So who controls it? Who controls the decision? Who controls and who authenticates and who takes the decision on who gets the benefits or not? Think of a tribal woman who does not even have a phone of her own, right? And she's even invisible to the whole system, cannot authenticate, cannot identify herself, cannot get the benefits that she's supposed to, and she's dependent on somebody else to make that process work for her, right? And some intermediaries will also extract a fee from her for this service, right? Think of a mid-level government official. They gain administrative power, can approve or deny with a digital trail that looks neutral. The digital trails look neutral, but it's built on certain pre-codified notions, right? And similarly, an NGO program manager designed to promote it who has created the system or promoted the system, right? But is insulated from the consequences. Is the program manager impacted by the consequences of this technology? When did they last visit Jharkhand? When did they last visit the communities who are most impacted by these technologies? So the question is, who gets left out, right? So now this is the myth of the silver bullet, right? So when we look at, for example, connectivity, the hype and reality, I'm just probably trying to take these two sides in some ways. Now, connectivity is equal to empowerment. Now that's the hype, very clearly a hype, right? Facebook's free basics in India, which was suggested, I don't know how many of you remember, 2015, 2016, it was marketed as bringing the internet to the unconnected. Now, the issue is that internet is a digital common. It's open to everybody, right? But again, when Facebook's free basics, it took that sort of central position. A lot of groups actually contested that, fought against it, and luckily so, and thankfully so, pointed out that it gave Facebook disproportionate gatekeeping power over what the internet meant for millions of first-time users. So free access is not equal to free internet, right? AI will solve poverty. Again, very, again, a huge discussion point. The point is that when technology is getting developed, we develop it using these words like user-centered design, user-centric design, human-centered design, etc. Right? But the ground realities differ quite a bit, right? So, for example, an agriculture recent, I won't name the organization, they worked on a solution for agriculture, well-intentioned program, but for crop disease detection, right? But they were primarily trained on images and data from non-India context, right? So from other countries primarily. So which means the data sets that were training these models were not at all from the Indian context, right? So field trials in India showed how inaccurate they were, and accuracy automatically dropped for local crop varieties and disease presentations, right? So the training data reflected a different context, a wealthy country sort of agricultural context, but the real problem here, the local context was not taken into consideration. It's called METIS, right? So the local context. The third part, right? So which is about scaling fast and breaking things. Again, that's a huge market-led approach, kind of a thought process where, for example, some of the Ola, Uber driver contracts in India, for example, rapid scaling happens. Some of these market-led approaches scale very rapidly. They lock drivers into algorithmic pricing that reduce their earnings over a period of time without even their information, without even communicating to them, without educating them about why it was done and how it was done. Right? It obviously studies, even there are mixed opinions about it. Right, saying that it has obviously created a lot of opportunities, jobs, livelihood, etc. Definitely acknowledged, but it also is creating control over many of these users, right? And in fact, studies have shown that Indian cab drivers earn below minimum wages once costs were factored in. Right, speed of scaling outpaces the ethical audit. That's another market-led approach. Right. The third is technology is politically neutral. Right. Again, a huge misconception, a big hype, in my humble opinion, because we've seen how channels like social media platforms, etc., lead to disinformation, misinformation, and also creates a lot of challenges within the social context, creates a lot of social unrest when this information is taken out of context and used for wrongful sort of intent, wrong intent, intentions, right? So we've known enough examples about it. And again, when there's no sort of moderation, when there's no sort of community-led ownership of these technology interventions, it obviously creates. So it's a political choice, right? And has legal and lethal consequences. So that's something extremely important to know. And more data is equal to better decisions, right? So even Gram Vaani, for example, had its own IVR platform. We had analytics, right? We evaluated usage data, which showed community engagement was amazing, which was very high, and we were very happy about it. But when we dug deeper into the data, we figured out that a few community members, right, who are more powerful in the community's context, the higher caste members, were almost misappropriating the platform, right? And they were the ones who were generating most of the calls, and masking near zero participation from women and other, marginalized groups, especially, right? So, and that's a wrong reflection, right? So more data is equal to better decisions is not always the truth, right? Again, when we are talking about kernel condition, technology always amplifies existing human will, capacity, and institutions. Now, where those don't exist or are skewed, technology amplifies this skew. Now, what does this mean when you think about technology or any of the interventions, right? Think about it, keep it in your mind. We'll obviously come back to it.
Gaurav, can we pause to take some questions at this stage?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I was just about to tell that. Yes.
Okay. Actually, you all can unmute yourself and ask questions directly. We got some questions as part of the registration as well. We have noted those down, but if anyone has any questions, would like to unmute and ask, feel free to do that. We have one question in the chat box. I don't have the full name, but SH, would you like to unmute yourself and ask? Go ahead.
Hello, Saram brother, is my voice audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, Saram brother, this is Prajit speaking. I just had a question, right? One, I do not work in the social sector directly. I only try and support as a volunteer in one way or the other. Recently, I've been working with a couple of organizations, one called HRF and another one called People for Good, right? Both of these are in different stages of their technology journey. But one thing which is coming out across when I discussed with both of them is that we probably, what do you see is the role of governance from the non-profit or the organization side before they want to actually jump on a technology roadway, right? So many times people say, okay, I'm getting a free, say a Google Workspace, or I'm getting something that's going to be free. And like you said, people come up with hope. They say that, okay, fine, things are going to be much faster. Data is going to be more streamlined. So ideally, where do you see this go, no go decision should lie? And it's very easy for all of these organizations to say, hey, AI has come through. It's going to make things much faster and things like that. who takes the call, right? Is it going to be that board of trustees who run that organization? Is it maybe the chief of the organization who says, yes, I'm going to take a call and say, yes, we're going to go down this technology route or not? Versus let me go down the route, see if I fail, see if it's adding any value, and things like that, right? So maybe if we can just touch a little on this aspect, it'll help.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Prajit. I mean, so if you look at, so let me just break down technology and its application for organizations, especially in the social sector, right? So in fact, any organization. One is when you want to use technology to improve your own organizational, processes or structures, or for example, improving your own organization's productivity in some ways, right? So whether it is in the form of, email clients, or even in the form of messaging clients, or in the form of using analytics platforms, or using SaaS platforms, right? Or using any of these open source tools. Now that's a call which is focused towards improving your own organizational productivity, right? As part of your internal processes. That's one part. The second part of technology is how much of what part of technology are you intending to use for as part of your work with the communities you operate with, right, or interact with. So these are two separate elements. The first part is again something that the organization has to decide very clearly in terms of what is the problem statement, right, and how does technology sort of help resolve it. Right, and I'm sure to improve your productivity and improve your processes structures, the call is completely within the organization's common interests and conversations that happen internally to see which tools work better. This is still fine, right? And even there, the problem statement comes first, saying that okay, what is the problem statement? How can I solve it? And can technology resolve it or help amplify or help sort of address that particular problem? So it's basically not putting the horse before the cart, saying that first identifying the problem and then figuring out how do we solve it, what's the best solution, and is there a tech solution available or needs to be built to solve that, right? In terms of communities where the risk parameters are even more stark, I think that's where a lot more caution has to be sort of invested upon, right? So you have to be extremely careful about how you deploy technology, why do you want to deploy technology, and when you deploy technology, was it because the touch points are the communities, the most underserved, most impacted people based on this decision, right? The consequences are not faced by the organization, but by the communities. So we have to be able to take them into trust. The purpose of leveraging technology has to come from them and not from us as an organization, right? And when we identify the purpose, co-design with the communities, co-develop with the communities, and most importantly, co-implement with the communities, right? So it's not just about designing or developing with communities, but also implementing technology solutions with communities that makes a lot of difference. And that's where the need for humility and also flexibility to understand that these cannot be rigid technology structures or solutions. They will have to be nimble enough so that based on feedback, and you create those feedback loops and accountability structures, you're able to sort of tweak and recalibrate the program or solution or technology solution to meet the community's needs. And more importantly, ensure that how does the power dynamics work? Who does that solution or technology give more power to, right? So the previous slide you saw, that's the question that we should be asking. In fact, some of the last slides that I've got has a couple of these points, but broadly, this would be my answer. I don't know if I was able to address it.
Sure. Thank you so much. This gives a lot of clarity. Thank you, brother.
Brother, we have two questions that we received as part of the registration. Both of them are in the similar lines. I'll try to club them together so both of those can be answered. Arya had asked, how do you, in the age of AI where there is information overload, in the age of social media where there's information overload, how to ensure that the most simplest and the most direct information is shared to the relevant audience? And Parikshit also asked a question of the similar nature, that how does actually AI help to amplify the narrative of tech for good in general? Any AI models, or he's specifically asking any sovereign AI models such as Sarvam that can help the development sector actors amplify their narrative and reach the audiences that they want to?
Got it. Karan, the second part I understood, the AI part. What is the first part? I probably was couldn't hear clearly.
The first part is with the information overload that there is there. How do we ensure that the simplest information is given to the audience in the most direct way?
No, absolutely. I think this is where I want to emphasize that, for example, Gram Vaani's own work, right? So we have placed a lot of focus around using appropriate technology, right? Appropriate technology is something that's very simple, easy to use, and also cost effective. And most importantly, takes into account the context of the communities. When we are looking at information overload, now we obviously can talk about the country being having smartphone penetration that's going through the roof. Most people have smartphone smartphone access or internet access. So it's not just about affordability and access, right? The third part, or the third A, that Gram Vaani also focuses on is agency, right? Agency to choose and decide the use and relevance of these technology tools. Now, even if you go into the usage of smartphones and usage of internet across India, across different user groups, now there's definitely a lot of proliferation of YouTube, social media platforms, WhatsApp, etc., which largely remain reflective of what internet means or smartphones mean for a large part of this population. The question to ask is that how much of a contextual and actionable information do these platforms provide these users with, right? Or is it creating more harm? Yes, there are definitely amazing examples of how YouTube and other channels have been used by communities, but we also have to evaluate what kind of harm have they been creating, and also in terms of, is the scale really verifiable in terms of the kind of impact that we are talking about, right? So information access has to be contextual to the community's needs. It has to be credible, and it has to be actionable. Which is why Gram Vaani has used simple voice-based platforms, whether it is voice through IVR platforms, which is interactive voice response platforms, or using WhatsApp, but still voice-based, because voice helps leapfrog the challenges of literacy and digital literacy. And when you provide information in the local language, in the local context, it helps people relate to it. And when you create hyperlocal community-based conversation spaces, we in fact call them as digital community commons. It helps communities share information, learn from each other, express views, thoughts, opinions, reflect on some of these local issues, collectivize, and actually take action in a very contextual manner, right? So that's how the importance of voice-based platforms, hyperlocal platforms, and community-anchored platforms have played an important role in ensuring that technology does not lead to exclusion.
Okay. What I'm understanding from this is maybe there is a place for specialized platforms versus all-purpose platforms, because all-purpose platforms will have like too much information and may not be reaching the right audience in the intended manner. If this like sort of understanding is right, maybe from like your own Gram Vaani's experience, can you also share how you maybe decided to narrow down into launching Gram Vaani voice-based versus, just as an example, WhatsApp also has voice features. So not using WhatsApp maybe, but using Gram Vaani's own platform. If you could just share some relevant examples so that we all can understand this better.
Absolutely. When we look at, for example, let me just probably take an example, right? So look at how Gram Vaani's community development entrepreneurs, the people who anchor our community platforms or digital community commons, the way they helped the communities, especially the farmers. A large part of the farmers that we were working with did not, this was in Bokaro, Jharkhand, so many of the farmers we were working with did not have smartphones, right? So some of them did have, many of them did not have. Now, how do you ensure that all these users were provided with the right information and help them collectivize, right? So we could not use WhatsApp, obviously, right? So we needed to use a channel that was easily accessible to all the community members or the target audience. So what did we do? We used our voice platform to actually help the community farmers express themselves, learn about the problem, challenge, express themselves, and also through the community voices, through the farmer grievances that were recorded on the platform, the community development entrepreneurs were able to use that as an evidence to drive local level accountability. They were able to show this evidence to the local MLA and drive accountability by asking the right questions, showing the evidence, and also ensuring that the farmers were able to collectivize around this issue and also get that resolved, right? So it's about empowering the communities with tools that matter to them, that they can relate to, that they can access easily without too many obstacles. Right? This is a clear example of WhatsApp was an option, but WhatsApp was not available for all the members, right? And more importantly, voice-based through the Gram Vaani's voice platform, people were able to listen to each other's perspectives, views. It gave them courage to express themselves. And more importantly, it created a safe space, right? Which helped the community development entrepreneur or our local community champions use these voices as evidence to drive local level accountability.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and
we
I think
have
there was
another
one more question, right, regarding this AI.
Yes, the other question was like how we have our own sovereign AI model. Sarvam is one of the Indian startups who's developing our own models. Does that help in reaching out to people at scale in an efficient and effective manner? I don't know if Parikshit is here with us. I hope I articulated your question correctly. If you're here, you can actually unmute and speak. But Brother Vijay can answer this question.
I understood the context. Yeah, I understood the context. No, absolutely. I think the models are definitely helpful. And obviously, when we look at creating more sovereign models, it takes into account the large indic data, language, diversity that India obviously is dealing with. So naturally, we will have to build local models, which will ensure that whether it's in speech recognition or natural language processing, etc., we have to be able to build these models, right? Local models. Now, one is building these local models, but we also have to understand that to ensure that these models take into account both thematic, dialect complexities and also geography-based contextualities into consideration. A lot of data, the knowledge base that goes into training these models also have to be sourced from the communities, right? To ensure that the inputs that go into training these models also take into, are also able to bring about, or at least they help the models, take into context the nuances associated with dialect, with theme, because it's so diverse. The country is so diverse, right? So both in terms of dialects or even in terms of socio-ecological sort of context. So you will have to take into consideration these complexities as well, right? So it's very important that these models work with organizations, community-based organizations and communities themselves to ensure that these models are, work bottom up. They take into account testing, feedback, and evaluation of these models, working closely with communities and iterating on these models as we go, because it's not a one-time process. It will evolve and improve as we go. But I think it is important to take a very bottom-up approach, in this context. And I do see some very interesting examples or discussions and work already happening in this particular space.
There's a follow-up question to this. Is Gram Vaani looking at using voice AI, given their wide use case for enterprises?
Oh, yes, we have been already. So in fact, even just 3 to 4 years before the generative AI models came about, in 2019, 2020, we had built the first. So voice AI is one part, but the use of AI in general. So what we had done is that because of our community-based platforms, we were able to generate a large quantum of question and answer data sets on certain thematic areas like sexuality, reproductive health, agriculture, workforce and labor rights, right? So what we did is that we built models to automate access to these question and answers. So people even with simple feature phones would ask a question and the system would be able to convert that audio to text, do a database check and play out the most appropriate responses and actually even take feedback. So we built these models and solutions almost in 2019, 2020. But of course, with the evolution of AI and the generative AI models that are coming up, we've obviously been able to test it further. Now, even with voice AI, we had built certain models in 2021, around 2021. But now, even as recently as last month, Gram Vaani was also part of the Listen at Scale program, by Ekstep and Sarvam AI, where we launched a voice AI application, around women entrepreneurship and livelihood, and also again on sexuality and reproductive health. And we're actually looking at testing it on other thematic areas as well.
Okay. We can maybe take a couple of, if you have a couple of more case studies, brother, we can take those up. We are at 5:15 already. I also want to check with the students and also with you how much time we can extend this session by.
I'm good. I mean, as long as the students are fine and others are fine.
Okay, we can take another 15 minutes. So I would request everyone, maybe if you have another questions, you can just post it on the chat box. We'll take those. Meanwhile, brother, you can proceed with maybe a couple of more examples or case studies from your experience.
Yeah. I just want to talk about the hard truths, right? When good design isn't enough, right? This is actually the core. This is what I wanted to also reflect on of what we learned in the hard way, right? So this is the heart of Gram Vaani's own case. So, almost 15 years of our work on the field. Now, good design is necessary, but it's not sufficient, right? So the social technical interface, the space where the technology meets complex human systems, always generates surprises, right? So you might have a test case, you might build hundreds of test cases in the lab, right? When you build technology, when you build solutions, but when the rubber meets the road and when the solutions get deployed in the community context, it always throws up surprises. And that's because our social structures are so complex, right? So we'll have to keep in mind that particular aspect, right? So the question is whether you're organized to catch and respond to them or not, right? So the technology literacy gap. Now, what happened was that early mobile Vaani deployments assumed that if people had phones, they would figure out how to use interactive voice response systems. Imagine IVR is a fairly simple interface, but even that, it did not work easy because the concept of speaking to a machine or even when we today look at app-based chatbots, right? We assume that people will figure out and they'll learn very easily. Yes, there are certain parts of the community who will learn that, but not everybody, right? So the concept of speaking to a machine that will broadcast your voice to the community, there was no cultural reference or a social reference to that kind of for most first-time users, right? So in Jharkhand, for example, what did we do is that the field teams actually found that even communities familiar with radio, our program was, our solution was built, keeping in mind community radio as a model. Even they could not, obviously users could not even, conceive of that kind of an interactive radio in many ways, right? So the concept of I am a broadcaster simply did not exist. But what did we do? We said that, okay, now we created offline community clubs. We created community volunteers, groups of 15 to 20 community members who would meet weekly, listen to the previous broadcast together, and were coached by a local coordinator who would record their first contributions, make them listen to their voices. That really empowered them. That really made them feel, it was quite a novel idea for them. And that's how we were able to embed this solution within the community's context. Just give me a second, please. So the technology adoption was embedded in a very social process, and it was not standalone, right? There are, in fact, many similar examples in the case of M-Pesa, right, in Kenya, where it's a very big success story. But what's often, not spoken about enough is that Safaricom actually invested in very large network of human agents who worked with the communities, explained and demonstrated the service, to the communities, and that's what kind of drove adoption within the community. So technology will work, but only when the communities adopt these solutions and find it relatable and contextual to their needs, right? So the tech work because of an investment in human intermediaries and a human layer of support structures, right? So the second part, again, gender divide, again, a point which is often missed out is that we still don't realize that there's a large gender digital divide even in the Indian context, right? So, and across the world, rather, in most countries, right? So usage data shows predominantly male voices on the platform, which is what Gram Vaani's platform that I'm talking about. Field investigation revealed that women's access to phones was mediated by, when I spoke about agency, this is what it is, right? So women did not have their own devices or phones. They were largely shared devices owned by the husbands, fathers, or sons, or community members, or house members. They did not have their own devices, right? So even when women own their phones, even today, when many of the geographies we work in, women are restricted from using social media platforms, and there are strong social norms that limit their use in public context. So it's not just about physical access. Women who did use the platform are more likely to record songs, health questions, personal narratives, content that volunteers or even male volunteers often deprioritize in favor of political or infrastructure issues, judging it as not so important in many ways, right? So what did we do? We worked with women self-help groups and ensured that we create safe spaces for women to express, learn from each other, and build a local context around women-focused issues or topics, right? So that, I think, made a significant difference in terms of how especially the gender digital divide, especially in Gram Vaani's own context, we were able to address in some ways, right? And even then, even despite all this effort, we still had, even as of last year, we had about 35 to 38% women participation on the platform. And similarly, the Digital Green also has some great work that they've done with women federations for video dissemination on the agricultural content, right? And finally, one important point I wanted to highlight is elite capture, right? For example, in one district, I mentioned this earlier, is that one particular volunteer, or at least a group of volunteers, were largely, were upper caste, educated male, and who began to dominate the moderation of the content. All the user-generated content on our platform is moderated, both by community moderators and also our internal moderators, right? So they began to dominate the moderation, systematically removing any sort of tribal folk music or topics that the most marginalized groups were recording or sort of found relevant. This kind of was blocking criticisms of local politicians who are his social peers and using the platform as a vehicle for their own needs. So this is what we're calling as elite capture, right? This is textbook elite capture. The most socially powerful local actors appropriate as a resource meant for the marginalized. Now, what did we do? We said we ensured that each club was reconstituted. We actually shifted the whole narrative on the ground, and each club was reconstituted with explicit representation quotas by ensuring gender, caste, community representation on the club, right, of the community volunteer group. And this way we were able to create accountability structures and with independent governance structures, right, which was human assisted, people assisted, and ensuring diversity and participation, right? And finally, IVR grievance addressal. Users were given a dedicated number to flag moderator misconduct and ensure that even the moderators and also the community volunteers were also accountable to the communities and not just to the institutions, not just holding the institutions, but also even Gram Vaani's own institutions or community structures were accountable to the communities. This then broke the local power loop, right? And similarly, there are other examples like SHG federations in Andhra Pradesh, where this kind of an approach was taken, where a lot of elite capture was influencing credit access, marginalizing the poorest groups. So this was obviously ring-fenced by them through credit allocations for the bottom 25% of households, by asset ownership. Farmer produce organizations also did, different approaches to ensure that these kind of, elite capture, processes were kind of broken, right? So there were a lot of such examples, positive and strong examples that came from the community. So it is not about technology. It is largely structural. So the solution is not about tweaking technology or tweaking the code, but actually about how it was implemented and what are the kind of social structures that you're able to implement with the in collaboration with the communities to embed the technology platforms or solutions, right? So that's
yeah. There was brother, like there were actually 3 or 4 questions around these topics, and I think the last couple of sentences that you have said. So the questions, I'll just tell the questions for everyone's information. One of the question was, how can technology become a tool for social financial inclusion? And another question in a similar line was, how can tech for good be used in social sector, especially for gender equality and social inclusion? I think what you are hinting towards is technology can be an enabler, but sometimes it requires things more than technology, which is like structural intervention over there. But yeah, these 2 were the questions. We have a question around education. There's Nanda who is interested to know about your work in the area of education on engaging youth. So anything on these lines, if you have, that would be interest to the audience.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. I think just to answer the last question first, in terms of youth and engagement, definitely yes. Gram Vaani's platforms, both from the perspective of creating programs or interventions which were youth focused, livelihood focused, education focused, Gram Vaani has done a lot of work. And importantly, also training youth as what we are now calling as community development entrepreneurs. We've done a lot of work around, we have been doing a lot of work around that. And the focus now is that how do you create community-based, let me just probably just get to this particular slide, right? So where we are talking about, ensuring that it is bottom-up demand-led, which means that community anchored, the inputs and demand is coming from the communities. For example, youth within our communities who share their perspectives, views, opinions, demands, and what kind of challenges they're facing. Second is ensuring that technology is an enabler, right? So what we are doing is that it is this intermediary of community change makers that we call as community development entrepreneurs help connect institutions to communities, right? If we want any of the development interventions to sustain beyond project timelines, we need to have a trained cadre of community change makers who are interested in the benefit, in the well-being of the communities, to be trained in technology, to be trained in horizontal and vertical skill sets, and to be able to leverage technology tools for the benefit of communities. This is where we're training this cadre of community development entrepreneurs. And that's where a lot of work is happening, specifically with youth and women in the communities, and also creating supplementary income channels for them closer to the spaces, to their communities, so that they don't have to migrate, right? And also create aspirational livelihood pathways for them, both in the development sector and also just as supplementary income, even as they do perform their other roles within the community, including, for example, government functionaries like your Pashu Sakhis, Krishi Sakhis, right, banking correspondents, etc. They all operate in silos. They operate based on the mandate of the departments they work with and for, right? So, but they cannot operate in a horizontal manner, which is where the community development entrepreneurs also play that critical role in bridging that access gap. This is also touching upon the point saying that, okay, now women and gender equality, right? So again, there's enough evidence, data, which kind of highlights that gender digital divide is a huge problem that obviously creates a big economic gap as well in terms of the potential and what we are missing out, because a large part of the women in rural India are still not as equipped, right, or having the agency to be part of the digital ecosystem. This is definitely improving, but there's still a significant gap. So Gram Vaani again has worked on this program called Meri Awaaz Meri Pehchan, right, which is again very women focused, identifying women community entrepreneurs who are trained community change makers who leverage technology to mobilize women, to gather their voices, to let their voices reflect in terms of policy making, in terms of conversations that matter around social entitlements, right, around climate change, around agriculture. A large part of the agricultural labor force is women, but still they are the least represented in terms of policy making or narratives around agriculture. So this is where and around women in entrepreneurship. We in fact are doing a program called Udyami Vaani and Kaun Banega Business Leader in collaboration with one of our partners in Uttar Pradesh Development Alternative. Again, focusing on women and entrepreneurship. Right, been doing amazing work. So in terms of gender, in terms of youth, there's a lot of work that's happening. But again, taking a very grounds up kind of an approach, creating safe spaces, building the capacity of communities to leverage technology. That's something we should not be, forgetting about.
Got it. We have one question, and that may be the last question unless someone puts any question in the chat box. But Brother Ramnath had asked a question during registration. What would you do differently if you were to start Gram Vaani all over again?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I mean, as I said, we used to, till a few months back, Gram Vaani's always worked in this bottom-up sort of a model. That's been our core. That's been our approach to say that how do you reverse the flow of information? So we have always been, working at the intersection of communities, technology, and development. So as part of this, we have been building these community-based conversation spaces, or what we also call as Mobile Vaani clubs or digital community commons. So we used to call ourselves, our platform or our flagship intervention, as Mobile Vaani, which is a federated network of community media platforms, right? So these platforms were supported by these community volunteers. We used to call them as community volunteers till last year, right? While we've always placed emphasis on the capacity building of these community volunteers, the importance of these community volunteers in terms of driving local change, sustainable change, I think a narrative always has been about saying that a federated network of community platforms, technology capabilities, etc., while internally we've always believed that it was the people who are bringing about the change. But I think the narrative was what did not exactly fit what we were, doing, right? If we were to start Gram Vaani all over again, we would flip that narrative, right? We would say that it is actually a federated network of community change makers or community development entrepreneurs who are trained in leveraging technology, appropriate technology, and who can help connect institutions to communities. Technology is, again, only an enabler, but it is actually the intent and capacity of these community development entrepreneurs which brings about the social change. The community development CDE example that I spoke about, which helped farmers get the benefit, right, in terms of the scheme, it was done because of the community development entrepreneur, his intent, capacity, and capability to collectivize communities by leveraging technology and driving accountability within local institutions. It was not technology on its own, right? So if we were to, restart Gram Vaani, or if we were to redo it again, I think our narrative would shift from a platform-first approach to a people-first approach. And that's what we've learned, again, through a hard way, but we obviously have been clear about that all through.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, brother. I know we have spilled over a little bit of time already. What I would request is, if any one of you have any further questions, you can email that to the Sai Dev Talks email ID. Manoj brother has posted that in the chat box. It is Sai Dev Talks, SAIDEVTALKS, Sai Dev Talks @gmail.com. Of course, you can reach out to Brother Vijay directly over his LinkedIn and ask him questions directly. But I hope this was very useful for everyone. Thank you so much, Brother Vijay, for taking time out and explaining all the work that you have done in the simplest of words that you could. Brindavan Campus is saying our question which we made was actually answered. Okay, that's great. They have also liked it. They really like listen about Gram Vaani and the story behind it. So I think the audience has taken it well. As always, feel free to put in your questions saidevtalks@gmail.com. And hopefully we will connect again for the 10th session. Maybe exams may be coming up for all the students. I don't know how available they will be. There's also the World Cup final tomorrow. I hope everyone is excited for that. But thank you everyone for participating, and we will all meet each other very soon. Sai Dev.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Lovely opportunity. Thank you so much, Karan brother, Manoj brother, and everybody who participated. I do hope it was helpful. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to share more of our learnings and also experience working in this space. Thank you so much once again, Sai Ram.
Thank you, Sai Ram.
Thank you.